Good morning, all. Understanding the mechanism doesn't make you neurotic. Wanting to learn as much as you can about a specific area, understanding the mechanisms that control specific things, doesn't make you a neurotic. What it does do is it gives you the tools. It gives you the tools to put things back together again if you don't feel in control. It gives you the control that you want. It gives you the ability to, if you're on that path and things are going well, and then all of a sudden you take a few days off or things happen, which they do, it's life. Life is not one straight line. If you understand the mechanisms and you put the work in, then even if you stray off that path, you can find your way back. If you're on a train track and the train track falls apart for some reason, you haven't done that, you haven't done that, you haven't done that. If you don't understand the mechanisms, then you might give it more oomph than it actually needs. And therefore, the more you understand about a mechanism of action, the more empowered you become. So if we understand the mechanisms of, say, for example, circadian rhythm, the more empowered you become. And it also means that if you understand the methods of circadian rhythm and the importance of light, then when you go on holiday, you can, if you're going to America or if you're going east and you think about the jet lag, then actually what you can do by understanding the mechanisms is really kind of minimize that effect of jet lag and minimize the effect that that has on yourself in general. And so understanding the mechanisms doesn't make you neurotic, it empowers you. And with that in mind, if you're in Norway, then chances are you've had a lot of July off and July's coming to an end, so maybe you're thinking about going back to work. And maybe your sleep cycle has changed. Maybe your sleep cycle has changed over the summer period. Your kids have been off from school and therefore everybody's sleeping a little bit longer and you're dreading getting back or getting up earlier if you're going to have to commute. I'm not sure how the commute is now because I tend to work from home and therefore I don't have to commute. But if you understand the mechanisms of how to wake up in the morning, then you can actually make it easier on yourself. Say, for example, if you know when you wake up at the moment, if you wake up pretty much the same time every day, then you can work out what's called your temperature minimum, which is the lowest temperature your body gets on a given day. And that's important because you can adjust your light illumination around that time in order to push it forward or back. You can also adjust your temperature given the day, in order to push it forward or back. Say, for example, you're now waking up at 9 pretty much every day, and you have done for the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks over summer. Okay, so your temperature minimum is usually like around 2 hours before that, an hour and a half to 2 hours before that. So your temperature is minimum is maybe around 7:30. All right, but that's what time you need to get up. So how can you do it? So one of the first things you can do is find out your temperature minimum by looking at when you wake up and taking off 90 minutes to 2 hours from that. That's where your temperature minimum usually is. And then what you need to do is then you've got a 4 to 6 hour window from that in order to get a lot of light into your eyes. That will help accelerate your circadian rhythm. That will help phase shift forward or phase accelerate your circadian rhythm. What you can also do is help to increase your core body temperature. Now, one of the things I do in the every so often is I will have cold showers, or I would at least put various parts of my body into cold water in order for my body temperature to rebound into hotter. And so if you think about your body temperature throughout the day, it kind of goes like this, up and then back down to the lowest point, which is 2 hours or so before you wake up. And so what we can do is if we wake up and we have a lot of light here, and so we send a lot of light signals to your body, okay? Then also if we have a cold shower, it doesn't have to be cold, but it can be cold enough. What that does is it shifts your body temperature, it rebounds your body temperature, because your body temperature has to work hard, and it will shift it up. So all of a sudden our peak, instead of happening over here, is happening here. And so we'll start to come down. So the same with the light. If the light is very much here instead of here, then all of a sudden our light peak and our light sensitivity happens here, and then it starts to come down. And then all of a sudden we have phase shifted our sleepiness from over here to here. And therefore we'll want to go to sleep earlier. And therefore the next morning, because it can happen it can happen from a day to a day. The next morning when you wake up, your body temperature minimum will be slightly before it was last time. And then you do the exact same thing that day, and we shift it a little bit more. We do that exact same thing for 3 days, and we can shift it a little bit more. And you can shift it pretty much up to 3 hours. Now, I'm not suggesting that you maybe want to wake up at 6, but if you do, that is how you can do it. You can also do it by eating. So you have, your liver has a clock pretty much. And so if you wake up and you've had your light, you've had your sunlight exposure or daylight exposure, and then you eat 2 hours earlier than you used to, then again, that is another signal for your body to phase shift, accelerate, and so you're sleepier later on, earlier later on in the night. The other thing you can do is exercise. Because again, what does exercise do? It increases body temperature. And it also sends other signals to your body in order to say, okay, we're awake, we need to phase accelerate, and then you'll get sleepier earlier that day, and then you'll wake up slightly earlier the next morning. But the key is you wake up, because you went to bed slightly earlier because you were sleepier earlier. When you wake up the next morning, you still had the same amount of sleep, and you wake up as rested and recovered as you would as if you had slept until 9. But maybe this time you wake up at 8, and you do the same thing at 8 o'clock. So you get out, you get the sunlight, you have some cold if you can, but if not, so then you exercise because that increases temperature, and we can eat. And again, that will shift it a little bit. And the same thing is, if you can do all that within the first 4 to 6 hours of your temperature minimum, which remember is 2 hours before you wake up ish, 90 minutes to 2 hours before you wake up, then that will be good to phase accelerate and get you to wake up slightly earlier, if not around slightly earlier the next day. But the downside, or the opposite of that, is if you are shining lights or eating or exercising 6 hours before your temperature minimum. So if your temperature minimum was 7, so if you are eating, shining lights, having food, exercising around midnight, then you are doing the opposite. You are delaying, you are phase delaying, and so you'll wake up later, which is good if you are traveling and you want to phase delay. But for most of us that are going to go back to work and need to get up earlier, we want to phase accelerate and be able to get to sleep earlier and be able to wake up earlier. And so those things are light in the morning, as always. A temperature acceleration, so speed up the heating of your body. Now you might think having a hot shower will speed it up, but it actually does the opposite. The hot shower actually causes vasodilation, which is more blood to go to the surface, which means you lose a lot of temperature, which actually phase delays. sounds a bit silly, really, doesn't it? You have a hot shower, so actually that cools you down. That cools your body temperature down at a time when we want it to accelerate up. So when should you have a hot shower then? If it cools you down? In the evening, because we want our body temperature to go down. And so if you are cooling your body temperature down by having a hot shower, and what happens after the hot shower, you still got that vasodilation, therefore your body temperature cools down. What happens to your temperature minimum? It shifts slightly earlier. What happens to your wake up time? It shifts slightly earlier. So in the morning we can get daylight, we can have a cold shower, we can exercise and we can eat. And in the evening we can sort out our light, so we don't get light exposure 6 hours before our temperature minimum. We can have a hot shower in the evening to decrease our core body temperature. And so these are all things. This is what I mean about understanding the mechanisms of decreasing your core body temperature in the evening in order to wake up earlier the next day, or increasing the core body temperature earlier in order to go to sleep earlier. And so you understand these mechanisms, and all of a sudden you become empowered. I hope that's not too much for today. Just understand that if you are someone that has slept in all summer and you want to naturally get up earlier without feeling exhausted, etc., etc., then there are things you can do, such as getting a light on your face as soon as you wake up tomorrow, even today. What is the time? Today and tomorrow. Increase your core body temperature by having a cold shower or exercising, eating, and then this evening you can have a hot shower, which will cool your body temperature down. You can reduce the lighting, and make sure that you don't have any lighting 6 hours before your temperature minimum, which is 2 hours before you wake up. So if you woke up at 8 today, then your temperature minimum might have been around about 6. And so 6 hours before that, 12. So you don't want to eat, you don't want to exercise, you don't want to watch anything on TV or have bright lights on. All those things are a no-no. And then you could have a hot shower around 10 or 9 or 10. That will help keep your core body temperature down. Circadian rhythms, people. It's a fun one, and it has so much positive impact on your life that you will not regret understanding the mechanics and understanding and being empowered about how you can control shifting your